So today we were going to talk about the difference between cardiovascular training and resistance or strength training. I know a lot of times people ask you the question, what is the benefits to resistance training versus cardiovascular training? And I know that you've said it's kind of not an easy one answer question, but if you were talking with somebody, what are some thoughts that come to mind when you think about the difference between the two types of training?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to actually take into account what your fitness level is at this time. Because anytime you're trying to pick a form of training style to incorporate, you want to recognize where you're really at right now and what would benefit you the most. Because there's tons of different forms of exercise, and they all have benefits. And anybody that's into a specific kind will always brag about why they think their system is the best. But the reality is there's a time and a place for all the different forms of training, and they all benefit your body in a different way. So there isn't really one better or worse way of doing it. It has more to do with what is better at this moment. So even when you look at it, looking at, let's say, cardio versus strength training, if you're 18 years old and you're in perfect health, and you have a lot of muscle on your body, and you're really, and you're doing really well, and you want to lose 5 pounds, so you decide to go out for a run and clean up your diet a little bit, it'll be extremely effective. But if you're 50 years old and you haven't trained in 30 years, and you're 40 pounds overweight, then it isn't the same thing.
Right.
So it isn't really about talking about what's better or worse, is just making that decision of the reality of where you're really at. Yeah. And if you look at that, even for the way I described it, I mean, logically you realize, well, you aren't in the same position, and it probably wouldn't affect you as it wouldn't be probably the smartest way of doing it. So, like, I'll give you an example. If if you haven't trained for years, and and your foot or your ankle always bothers you, and you have a knee that's kind of funny, your lower back kind of flares up, and stuff like that, then when you do cardio, the biggest part of it is it's a repetitive motion. So, and there's an impact in it.
Right.
If let's use running as an example. So if you're a runner. Now, this doesn't mean that running is bad for you, but at this moment,
for that particular person,
it's probably not the best way to start off training again, because the running isn't really going to help your knee. It's probably not going to help your back, because there's not a lot of muscle gain when you run. I mean, there's no question you can lose body fat, and there's no question, that it gets you in shape, but it's not going to build muscle. Well, let's put it this way: it's not the most efficient way of building muscle.
Yeah.
So, you're probably going to end up losing a little weight, but then your knee's going to be really bad, and your back's going to be bothering you, and then you're going to just stop training. Right. So the idea behind it is you're trying to pick what works for you so that you can continually to train. And that's really the idea behind it. If you're stuck in the thing where I'm going to work out for 12 weeks, whip myself in shape, and then not train again for a year and a half, well, then
do whatever.
Do whatever you're going to do. But if you're really looking at it like, I've reached a point in my life where I want to make changes, and I want to be healthy, and I want to continue some form of exercise, and you recognize the benefits to that, then that's when you really need to analyze what would be the most efficient way for you to get there.
Right.
So it's just a logical approach to it. And, there's tons of information out there. There's tons of people telling everybody, like I said, why their system is the best and all that stuff. But that's all marketing. Mm-hmm. I mean, what it really comes down to is if you do have some injuries and you're a little overweight, or even maybe, let's say, if you're underweight, and you haven't exercised for a long period of time, then a lot of times, and I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time, strength training can be a really effective way to get you back into shape.
Yeah.
So you can handle things. So if I was 40 pounds overweight, I would take, and I had a back issue and let's say a knee issue, because we used that example. I would probably go into a strength training routine that, strengthened my lower back, stabilized my knee better, try to work through the injuries and get myself so that I was basically pain-free and felt healthy, and felt stronger. And at the same time, I'd implement some dietary changes so that I did start taking some weight off. And then once I got to a point where I was comfortable, then you can add some, cardio in with it.
Right.
And the two of them would work great together.
Right.
But if you can lose a little weight in the meantime, it would,
Right.
and like I said, and then if you strengthen everything, you're going to find that you're running, you can actually maintain your running. You're not going to just run for 12 weeks and then accumulate all these injuries.
Yeah.
And then, and then it's almost kind of the fact that there's, then people start thinking, well, every time I get in shape and I start running, I hurt myself. And it's like, well, running isn't a bad activity. It's just like I said, it's where you started from. You just started at the wrong point.
Right.
So, there's
there's multiple benefits to the strength training too that I don't think people are always necessarily familiar with. You've got your joint stability, which you've touched on, which is why starting out, if you haven't worked out in a while, starting out with the weight training is really safe because you're kind of baby stepping it. You're going to stabilize your joints, stabilize your back, get everything so it can handle the impact and the repetition. But what I've always found interesting is, when you have injuries that you're working around, the strength training is really, to me, one of your only options if you have to work around something. Because if you have a joint problem, how do you run and not irritate it?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And it's kind of like when you look at it like, if you had surgery on your knee, you'd go to a physical therapist and they'd rehab your knee. And, for physical therapy, a lot of it is range of motion, flexibility, strength. There's a balance between a lot of different things that they're looking for to get that knee functional and back to normal movement. And so, a lot of times there's a lot of misunderstanding with people with kind of where does strength training fit in because, unfortunately, probably all of us have had injuries over the years at one point or another and have done physical therapy. So most people are familiar with what physical therapy feels like. And they realize that there's, obviously huge benefits to it, but then there's also points where at one point you feel like you can't really go any further with it. Mm-hmm. And that's actually because that's exactly what it is that, you do the physical therapy and it gets you to a certain point, and then from there you are supposed to do something else to add onto it after you're done with it. So, which is really where the strength training fits in very well. But most of the time we think strength training is, like Olympic lifting.
Yeah, right.
Where you watch a guy put 500 pounds over his head.
Yeah, you see the muscle heads walking around, and that's what you picture when you think of weight training. Yeah.
But the reality is, it's a very effective, very efficient way to build muscle and strength, and and then obviously to heal joints and protect joints and stuff too. So the idea behind it is, if you go to any gym and you see like a circuit, which is, they'll have a line of equipment, whether it's Nautilus or, Life Fitness or Hammer Strength. But they'll usually have what I call like a circuit, which is basically a grouping of those machines all kind of lined up together. And, and what you'll have is you'll have a machine that works your chest and a machine that works your back and a machine that works your legs and your arms and your abs and, all your body parts. And so basically you just kind of go from one machine to another, and, by the time you're done, you've hit your whole body. And, those are if you don't know anything about training, it's a nice way to start. And, then but the problem I think with strength training is the debates behind it, because somebody says, well, I think free weights are better than machines, or machines are better than free weights. And the thing you have to realize is, just like I said, with all the forms of training, it's the same thing with all the different forms of strength training. Everything is a tool. And, when somebody comes to work on your house and they're fixing something on the house, they don't just come in with a hammer or a screwdriver. I mean, you come in with a toolbox. And the reason being is because every tool has a different function. And so every form of, when you go into a gym, they're all different tools, and all of them have different functions, and all of them will affect you differently. So you have to really I think you have to be more open-minded to it, and probably a little less of that concept of what's better. Because it's not what's better.
Right.
I mean, what's better in a tool? Is a hammer better than a screwdriver? Well,
depends on what job you're doing.
If you're a framer, I suppose you would definitely use a hammer more. And if you were an electrician, you'd probably use a screwdriver more. But that doesn't mean that one tool is better than the other. It just means that for their particular job, they'll use that tool more often. And so the idea behind it, though, is if you're just starting, everything is going to be effective for you. Whatever you do, it's going to make a difference. And so you just, you want to pick what you're actually. The biggest thing is what are you comfortable with?
Yeah.
If you're more comfortable on the machines, then use the machines. The technology in machines have gotten so much better over the years. It's unbelievable, and a lot of them are really effective, and they're great. And and the idea behind it is you're just trying to ease yourself back into it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're somebody that has been training for years. Like I get this all the time. I get a lot of clients that come here that are actually in really good shape, but the only thing they've ever done is cardio.
Right.
And so they're being introduced to strength training. It's still the same thing, to just ease them into it and get them used to things and get them comfortable with the machines and start building some strength, because the whole idea behind it is you're building. So you're starting from whatever level you're at, and then you want to progress forward or upward. You want to get better and better. So you want to get a little stronger every week. You want to get, maybe handle more sets or more repetitions, increase your fitness level. So there's, like I said, just really look at them as they're all tools.
Right.
And, they all have a benefit.